All right, we'll run you through some case studies here. We've talked some about 4 Times Square already. I think it's important to know that we started designing this building in 1995. As I said before, there was no discussion about it being green. The largest green building in the U.S. at that point was about 50,000 square feet, and this was going to be 1.6 million square feet. The industry really was nowhere. It was very much embryonic in terms of materials. Some of the furniture industries had started to make products that were low VOC. There was glass technology had been advanced quite a bit. Photovoltaics were something that was still intended for somebody's backyard and generally off the grid in the middle of the desert. Fuel cells hadn't really ever been conceived of for an office building of this type. But as I said before, when we had this retreat and it really started the bandwagon going, it was the next job was to educate ourselves. And, with the help of Rocky Mountain Institute and other experts in the field, we were able to, and with the help of the owners of the Durst organization, we sponsored a lot of this. We were able to bring in the experts from around the world, tell us what we could do, what we couldn't do. Cosentini Associates, the mechanical engineers, were nowhere up to speed on green design. They'd never really done anything like that. But Douglas Durst, in his wisdom, said, and when we in fact tried to suggest that Cosentini wasn't going to be the best engineer for this job, and Douglas says we have to get Cosentini and firms like Cosentini on board so that they know how to do it, and we have to educate them in the process. And we really didn't know whether we should be calling this a green building or not, because there was no milestone, there was no lead, there was no anything that would suggest that if you saved a certain percentage of energy that you would be green. But we knew since we were saving 41% energy right off the bat that we could feel pretty safe about that, from 41% from the normal building that was being built at that time, or in the late 80s. So we've gone well beyond this technology, but there's still a number of things that we actually have not repeated in an office building. One is the fuel cells. Unlike almost anything else in the green business, the cost of fuel cells went up rather than down. And those technologies are being advanced to the point where now we have hopes that it's going to become feasible. The problem is that although it's very clean because you're producing energy on site, it's about 85% efficient as opposed to 50%. It comes off the grid. It requires maintenance every 5 years, which is replacing the major parts, and it really its payback is I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but we estimated about 10 or 12 years when we put these in.
Yeah, it's interesting that this was the first new office building at that time. For several years, we were coming out of a pretty serious recession, as some of you may recall. And the idea that spec office buildings were very dangerous because people built spec and got burned, that there was an inherent sort of undertone that this ought to be a sustainable building. That if we're going to take the chance and do something out of the ground, and usher in this new economic period, we better do it the right way. And if anything, and on the evolutionary scale, I think 4 Times Square really talks about, it was really a great example of maximizing energy performance, using some renewable and solar technologies, and at the same time solving the indoor environmental quality issue that had plagued previous energy conservation projects. And a lot of times after the 70s, when the oil crisis took on, we saw a tremendous amount of energy conservation at the expense of indoor environmental quality, the sick building syndrome, for example. And this was really a revolutionary project in that it mediated both of those concerns and at a high level.
Yeah, I think another thing that was important about this building is that people kept saying, well, why would you bother to put a green building in Times Square? Well, all the more reason you should, because whatever you're saving, wherever that energy is being used, whether it's in commercial signage or whatever, it's every watt you save is going toward the betterment of the environment. The other aspect was that because it's in Times Square, where everybody comes and everybody could look at the building, knowing that that was a green building, would make a far greater impression than some building that was on some obscure street in Midtown.
And it rents pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that raises another point. It was a spec building. Condé Nast leased half the building early on, and it was adapted for them. And Skadden Arps leased the top half. Condé Nast was in the bottom half. And when we originally signed them on, there was no mention of this in the lease or its greenness in the lease or any aspect of it. But we then met with the higher ups, Cy Newhouse and various officers in Condé Nast, and they were totally gung ho. But then once it got down to the middle management level, where they were trying to meet a budget, trying to meet a schedule, a lot of those things got lost, even though we had set up guidelines for the tenants. And there's nobody's really ever evaluated how green the interior spaces are, but that continues to be a problem in office buildings where you can't control what the tenant does. As I said before, one of the great things about the Durst organization was that they were totally committed to having this job, this project, publicized as much as possible, not for its for the acknowledgement of it, but just to educate people so that we could, everything that we were learning in this process was put out there as early as possible, so that other people could follow, other people could understand what the difficulties were and so forth, which is what led to the book Lessons Learned from 4 Times Square, which was sponsored by the Durst. Pam Lippy edited it, and a number of us contributed, and it really got things moving very quickly.
And by the way, we think it's a pretty nice building, and it's important when you look back at the adoption curve. In order for these things to take hold, to really become popular, you need to hit the mainstream press, and architecture press doesn't necessarily focus on sustainability that often. But here comes along a project which sort of hits the high marks in all the categories and really brought a lot of attention, not just to the aesthetic and quality issues of the architecture, but it also opened the door for a discussion about the sustainability. And this was an opportunity, again, for a pilot project to have a broad outreach. And if it weren't for the design, some of that may have gotten lost. People don't generally write about bad buildings.
It also became a major catalyst for the LEED program. Is everybody here familiar with LEED? Is anybody who's not familiar with LEED? I'm not. Well, it's basically a rating system. It's like when you buy an Energy Star refrigerator. It's because it's been evaluated as to its energy conservation. LEED is a very comprehensive program where it includes everything from bicycle racks to energy to commissioning, and it's a very holistic approach to sustainability. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but it gave us a common language where we could all talk about, when we talk about a green building, not only can we talk about the fact that it's green because it is LEED certified, but there are also 4 categories of LEED so that you can talk about whether it's just certified, whether it's silver, gold, or platinum. And it's really given the whole industry a great boost. Let's talk a little bit about infrastructure now. The Second Avenue subway we have been working on for about 5 years with Jim Harris and Arab Group, engineering group. We've been designing the stations. There are 16 stations altogether. It's an 8-mile route that goes from 125th Street all the way down to Hanover Square. It is incredibly incredibly sustainable in its own, just by it, when it happens. And you can imagine the impact, how much it will change the amount of mass transit that will be used in that whole east side of Manhattan. And it also has tremendous regional effect because it will be tied in, linked in with a number of other systems. And it's just one more reason not to have a car, not to take a taxi in Manhattan. We're doing a number. We actually were given a separate contract to do the research development for green practices in the system. We've actually done this on several MTA projects, including Roosevelt Avenue out in Queens, which is almost finished construction, which is a very green project. And among the things that we've done, of course, is natural light coming into the stations. This is all very